Ben, so you're
So
running for
not
the education officer role on the student union. We're going to start by running through your manifesto. You said originally that you wanted to review the personal tutor system and ensure that all students can meet their tutors. Could you expand on this bit and tell me what concrete measures you'd want to put in place?
okay. So to start off with, I want all tutors to email their tutees at the start and end of both semesters, so that then people have an option to take the choices to contact their tutor. They know who they are. There's back and forth, because some people don't feel they need tutors. That's okay. But for those who do, I'm worried that they don't know who their tutors are, and so they should have a chance to get to know them at least twice a semester. I also think there should be a list of people's tutors on Moodle, so that then the list is easily accessible. Say you need something in the middle of the semester, say to file an extension, and you don't know how to do that, then you've easily got a list and you can check who your tutor is and send them a message.
Absolutely. So another part of your manifesto, you say that students find timetables hard to understand. I'm just wondering where you found this information from, and if it's just your opinion or from people you've spoken to, because I actually haven't heard of this being an issue, and I'm wondering if you've done any research to find out this.
Um, so there's lots of different strands to this. One of them is listening to working students and students who are parents. Chaotic timetables issued last minute, or the lack of preparation and awareness of timetables in advance is not very good for those who have other commitments outside of university. And university is a place, and education is somewhere where you should be allowed to learn and not have to worry about the other stresses, and they should not be affecting your educational performance. And so when your education is affecting your ability to look after your child, for example, we have a little bit of an issue that needs to be addressed, which is what I'm looking to do here, to make sure that the university issues timetables with at least 2 weeks' notice and tells of any changes as soon as possible. And I would like them to publish deadlines sooner, so people know when their exams are, when coursework is due, right at the beginning of the semester. Then there's no ambiguity. So it's all nice and clearly laid out at the start.
Um, you stated that you would like lecture capture to continue by creating an opt-out recording policy. Um,
Yes.
Something I would say about this is that it might not increase the recording of lecturers because some lecturers actually have a view against recording.
I am well aware of this, and this is why it's been an issue on just about every campaign for education officer forever. However, this year we're in a unique position. This year, lecturers have been doing lesson capture widespread. They've been recording their lectures, and so far, when we've not been told of many lecturers' fears. So in that case, we're at a bit of an advantage this year because it's been widespread this year, that some of their fears we can talk through more rationally without some of the bigger fears. There is still the argument about whose intellectual property it is, but the fact that it might be sent widespread hasn't happened this year. So perhaps we can reason more, and teachers' unions will be more willing to get behind it, which is what I'm hoping um, this COVID experience will have taught them, that actually it's not as scary as they may think, but if they still have their concerns, they can opt out, but they should notify students of that, so that then students know, because obviously lecture recording is very important for students with disability action plans. When something goes wrong at home and you need to go home, there's all these situations where lesson recording is so helpful. And so I really think that, yeah, lecturers will be more willing to get behind it this year. Having seen it happen, they will be more open to the idea again.
You stated a policy in your manifesto which talks about investigating the effects of pre-recorded lectures on students. Um, obviously, without going into too much detail, how would you plan on doing this?
So basically, I want to review and ensure that pre-recorded lectures are not continued post-COVID unless they are really needed. They are a mechanism whereby they don't create value for money for students. However, if students like that, then there needs to be more of them. So it's about balancing the risks and trying to figure out whether students like them and whether and what impact they have on mental health as well. The fact of not being able to speak to a lecturer in person during a lecture and ask a question means that you have to send an email. And I don't. I think people are perhaps less likely to send an email than just send a question which they can send anonymously to a lecturer or ask a friend to. I just feel like it's been having an effect, and I really think we need to understand it, especially because now it's been started and the university has realised that there is money to be saved. That they don't just continue it without student support for such measures.
Absolutely. So, would you take a focus group to find out this, or would you do surveys, anonymous surveys?
I think I would do anonymous surveys because, as I say, the people who the people who are afraid to ask questions via email because of having to identify themselves may not want to identify themselves in the survey. So it's about not scaring away the people who um, give answers that may be that may have other reasons behind them.
There's a policy that you talk about, which is managing the impact that Brexit has on placement and semesters abroad. So, giving visa help to students who need it. Something that I have seen by doing my own research is that most of the issues that come up with placements is that there are now lots of jobs within the EU that are asking for only EU passport holders as a placement, a prospective
Yes.
student myself. Most people I know who have got placements in the EU have been, subject to this condition. So, could we say that this policy would most likely be limited to only helping students on semesters abroad get visas, as opposed to students who are going to be looking for placements in the EU, because ultimately you won't be able to negotiate with companies whether or
Not
not.
necessarily, because there is also discussions with the universities and some of the companies that we've had regular placements with about actually easing those restrictions and letting the UK students where we've built connections. And so it won't just affect EU students and new students coming in, it will affect those going out into Europe to do their placements potentially, or into um, the wider world as new connections are opened up. So Brexit presents opportunities, but it also means that we're going to have to change how things are done. And so we need to make sure that we're pushing the placements teams to be as supportive as they can be and to make sure that as many opportunities are available to as many types of student as possible.
Yeah, that sounds great. You stated that you would like to create departmental socials for students who are on placement so that at the end of the year they can integrate back into university socially. I think this is a really good idea, but I just wanted to question why you chose to do it towards the end of the year, given that students who are coming back might need to find housing, and as we know in Bath, that happens fairly earlier on in the academic year. So why is it that you've chosen to do it at the end of the year?
Um, I would be happy to do them all year, to be honest, but it's more about as people begin to think about coming back to university, regaining those social connections. So yeah, in terms of building for accommodation earlier in the year, yes, that is definitely something I would like to add as well to that and build opportunities so that people can socially and get housing sorted within a supportive community and have access to the support they need and socialize again, because you're spending lots of time at work and then when you come back to uni you've got to renegotiate and reweave your friendships, And so I want to make that process of coming back socially easier, but as well as that with housing, which I hadn't fully considered. But yeah, we need to make that easier for placement students coming back as well, definitely. And that will be part of the way we can do that. But then, as part of this whole process, it was as well speaking to placement students, setting up a body of placement students to take these sorts of questions to gain a insights to what placement students really want. So I would be flexible as to how exactly we deliver it, depending on what they consider their needs to be.
Again, this next question is similar to about timetabling. So you mentioned that there is a disuse of city-based study spaces. However, at the moment during COVID, you have to book online, and it is actually quite hard to get a spot. And equally, before COVID times, there were often like queues out of the doors to get seats for study spaces. So I'm interested again, is this like a personal reflection that you think, or is this actually based off data?
Again, speaking to people, I found that people feel that study spaces out in the campus, in the city. I've got friends who study in the city, and they say that those spaces are not fully utilised. So I want to understand if that's the case and why. And so then we can start towards exam periods where the library gets absolutely full of students and you can't move for a chair. See if we can try and direct people out into these other spaces in the community rather than yeah, cramming the library. And if that's, see what students want in a study space. So if there's adaptations needed to these study spaces to make them more inviting or to let people know they're there. Like I've been doing some research. I didn't realize we had some of the study spaces we have. There's one on, there's one opposite the, I can't think now.
The Virgil building.
There's one opposite Virgil. And so I don't know how many people know that space existed, but I certainly didn't. And so I feel like those spaces being properly utilised could take some of the strain away. Now, that's not to say that I won't do anything else on it. It's just we might as well work with what we've got before we start bringing in drastic other measures.
You spoke about in relation to maximising and utilising study space that you'd want the library to maximise their desk space after the COVID restrictions are lifted. I was just wondering how you would aim to do this because obviously there might be funding issues involved in this and it could potentially be beyond the library's remit. So, do you think this is a realistic goal to have?
I think that with COVID, that when COVID is, well, considered over or restrictions are beginning to be lifted again, I feel like there's opportunities for us to look again at the spaces. Things things like the ground floor of the library have been the way they've been for quite a while. And so they may not be using a space as effectively as they could be, but they are the way but they're just remaining the same way. So once we've once we've opened up the space because of COVID, how we decide to put things back, there may not be need for more tables. It may just be how we open up desk space. So there may be funding issues, but there may also be practical, cheaper ways to do it, which open up more desk space. And there's a whole variety of options. I'm not promising a newly furnished library, but there will be a measure somewhere in between which the library and hopefully the university and myself as education officer could come to a consensus on.
You spoke of how you want to review the support and guidance that's given to academic reps. I was just wondering, could you briefly explain what an academic rep is? Because it is a role that you have to apply for, so I feel that this idea might not resonate with some students.
And that in itself is kind of a sign of what I'm getting at. The fact that students may not know who their academic rep is in itself something that we need to make sure is properly signposted and make sure that, people the academic reps feel able to do their jobs. So in the um, the faculty reps, particularly, I've been told by people that they don't receive very much support at all. They're kind of just left to it. So there's multiple levels of reps, and there's this big chain of about 4 or 5 different groups of sets of academic reps working up through the university. So you start with by course, and then there's a board of chairs, and then there's for the faculty, there's a group of representatives for the faculty, which is separately elected, and then there's the group which I would be on, and the president are on, which feeds back into the wider university and back into the governors. So it's a nice, confusing structure that needs some clarification, I think, and to make sure that people are feeling like they understand where they fit, and make sure that where they fit is accurately reflected in the support they get. I'm not saying that low levels need no support, but at the same time, mid level seems to be being a bit ignored, a bit overlooked at the moment, and so they probably need more support.
You said in your manifesto that you want to reduce crammed deadline periods towards the end of semesters. I do agree that this is definitely going to be a large issue for students and something they'll be considering when voting. However, there are going to be 2 cohorts of students, first years and second years, who have done either one set of exams or no real in-person exams at the university, which is something that's probably going to have a lot of consequence. Do you think that it's important that infrastructure is put in place to help them? And if so, what would you recommend?
Yes. So, starting off with my manifesto, just to explain, I'm saying about a 24-hour break between deadlines to allow students time to recover. So I'm sure that many students, especially in the last block where all of the timings were more tightly pushed together, have had exams overlapping or coursework assignments more often. I've often found, speaking to students, actually it's coursework that overlaps, that where they set all at the same time and are due within. Sometimes you've got 3 assignments due on the same day. That's an unnecessary amount of stress and just bad planning in terms of when you set deadlines. So it's making sure that deadlines are spread out both through the semester and then through the assessment period. So there's always possibilities as part of the academic reform that have been going through for the wider implementation of assignments throughout the year. And I know that year ones in social sciences have been asked to do booklets and journals and things. And this is the kind of thing I would encourage to be used more often, as well as the other standard forms of assessment, just to make sure that there's not such a cramp. So in effect, rather than having all exams right at the end, making sure that we are suitably assessing throughout the unit so that then there's not such a cramp at the end.
Um, you, your opposition said that he would want to implement a universal reading week. What are your thoughts on this proposal, and is it something that you'd be willing to adopt if you became the education officer?
Um, it sounds like a good idea. Um, I'm not sure how feasible it is for some types of students. I know that in, social sciences, politics, those kinds of courses, it's fairly easy to do. I don't know what that would happen with a student on, say, a maths course, or the implications would be on somebody studying engineering type course. So I would need to do a little bit more research into that. But theoretically, I support the idea. I'm not sure how deliverable it is, though. So I want to make sure, find out first.
Um, you have obviously been a Bath student for a couple of years now. Seeing others take on the education officer role, what have you learned from previous officers? What would you do in office, or what wouldn't you do in office?
Oh, that is a question and a half. What would I do? I mean, Annie has been doing really well with the communication, and I really would intend to keep that flow of information, make sure that people know what's going on. Again, earlier in my manifesto, I say about making information generally more accessible, and that's the kind of thing I want to do. And I'm really pleased that Annie has been doing that, and I would like to continue her work in making sure that things are accessible, things are clear, and yeah. In terms of things I would like to improve, um, I think I think generally all of them have done a good job. It's just I think part of it is making sure that the universe is pushing the university to act more quickly. So with the non-detriment policy, I know people like Anne were pushing for it, but I feel like actually I um, will be coming into a position where we don't know what's going to happen in September, but I'm obviously pushing for the university to try and declare uh, levels of kind of provision on a what if basis so that then students know what they're expecting rather than reactive policies. Now, that's not Anne's fault at all. That's what happens when you're in a crowded uni market and everybody's trying to one up each other and trying to make sure that scales balance. So yeah, it's about trying to push them to do stuff earlier in the students' interests.
If you were only able to implement one thing from your manifesto list during your time in office, what would it be?
Oh, um, hmm, interesting question. I've got one policy which um, particularly sort of all of the stuff around students with from minorities and making sure that their voices are heard. So making sure that DAPs are adequate, making sure that support for mature students are getting what they need, making sure that the universities closing attainment gaps. It's kind of just a mixture of the making sure that people are supported and that the university is working for as many people as possible.
And lastly, Ben, could I ask you what makes you a better candidate for this role than your opposition?
Oh, I feel like I provide a unique perspective as a student who has a disability. Um, so I've sort of I've seen some of the ways policies are enacted that perhaps that my opposition hasn't. Now, uh, so I hope that my understanding of how things are being done, especially in terms of DAPs and making sure that students feel supported, is really getting to the heart of what my campaign is about. I obviously don't know yet what my opponent's manifesto entails, so I don't entirely know what his strengths or weaknesses are. But I feel like mine is the degree to which I want to support the community and make sure everybody is feeling supported and cared for.
Brilliant. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Ben, and all the best of luck with your running this campaign.
Thank you.